The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay. Hi, I'm Matt Sorrells, and George Roberts is here with me, and we're going to do a, a kind of demo live presentation of using HGSI from a new user, trial user perspective. We're going to show you some pretty simple, basic ways the software works, work through some simple scenarios, show you kind of getting started intro and see where that takes us. So when you first start HGSI, it has to download a lot of database and set up a whole lot of stuff because the whole product's based on a very large stock database that then everything else is built from that, and so it has to be updated. But once the first initial database is downloaded and everything's updated, you end up basically the main toolbar is what allows you to navigate around HGSI. By default, the very first time we open the charting and a few other windows for you, but normally HGSI's main toolbar is where you'll find all the main tools. And the toolbar is set up into basically two sections. The first four buttons are the actual tools themselves, and the second half here is all utility kinds of functions, things for updating the database, working with intraday data, backing up your settings, backing up, setting your preferences. Also the help and the learning center. These guys are really the key to, if you've got a question, the help and the learning center under the big help button, which is also available on all the other modules, will get you the best information you can possibly get. And there are other informational links that'll open in your browser. So today we're going to start off with the designer. The designer, HGSI, in addition to the large stock database, on top of that, we have what we call the group database. And basically, it's a set of groups. We ship and maintain a very large set of reference groups. That's these HGSI reference groups. They're indexed. They're rebuilt every day. They include all the Amex, all the market indexes, which are things that start with a $. So they'd be like the Dow, S&P indexes, those kind of things, all the NASDAQ stocks, all the NYSE stocks. And then we list all the securities that make up the database in one group. We list all the closed-end funds, which are a separate kind of category. We have component lists, and these are group lists that we license, and of various under ETF components. These are the stocks that are held by the ETF in question. So you can look through here and find an ETF and see the stocks that make up that ETF. Now, ETFs, they don't just consist of stocks. They also consist of things that aren't stocks: money market funds, cash, commodities, futures. They're not necessarily just containers of stocks, and HGSI only lists stocks. So the data here, it's not the total wealth of the ETF in question. It's just the stocks that are held, and they have to be on the big boards. They have to be non-over-the-counter stocks. We don't track any of the penny stocks, and so some ETFs will have some of that too. But and you can never really be 100% sure when these were updated, as far as how often the ETF reports its actual holdings varies drastically. So, but these give you an idea of the stocks that make up ETFs, and can enable you to develop some interesting trading systems based on that. We also have index components, which are the stocks held by various indexes, including the Dow Jones Industrial, the NASDAQ 100, and these groups contain the stocks that make up those indexes. And we also have our own version of indexes where we compute them, and this is mainly under the industries and sectors. HGSI has a large database of industry groups, and each industry group, we compute an index from that. And this is really one of the key features of HGSI, is that every one of its groups can have an index where we take the stocks that make up that group and we compute an index based on it. And the index is part of the group. So we're looking at advertising and marketing, and you can see there's an advertising and marketing index. And if you open the stock chart for that, you see the index. Now, HGSI indexes are they're not long-term, they're not archaic market indexes where the value is recorded every day in the database and is the same forever. We actually recompute the index every time you update the database. And so it dynamically changes based on which stocks are in the group in question. But it does give you an average kind of value of what that group of stocks is actually been worth over from the start date. And our indexes are controlled using options in the global index options. And you can set what kind of indexes you'd like to build and what the start date is. And you can set the start date back further. By default, we do 52 weeks. Our indexes by default excludes securities less than $5. And this is mainly because they make really poor indexes. The indexes are set up so that on the start date, the index has a value of 100, and the scaling is based on the kind of weighting you chose. And so our industries, all of our industries have indexes, and you can actually walk through the various indexes and see how that group of stocks that made up this index behaved over that period of time. One of the features in almost all of our windows is we have this report, which brings up this little window, which tells you about the thing you're looking at, and it changes as you change. Each viewer, this report window will update, and as you can see here, since I'm looking at this agriculture producers index, you can see some summary data. It's a HGSI computed index. It was equal dollar weighted. It started a year ago. It used the default internal filter, and 14 securities qualified to be included in that index from this group. And if I step through to the next one, this window changes, and you can see some of the summary. So one of the handy features this window has is you can actually walk through a list, and it'll update as you walk through the list. So you can quickly find interesting things about stocks, especially if you have multiple monitors. You can put this on another thing. The other panels, if you actually look at a stock that's in a group, for example, let's just pick one of these random. The company will have a business description, and then the tabs have information on various financial earnings, summary of market cap, short interest. Now, all of these data fields are also available in other parts of the product. This is just one nice way of visualizing it. We also have a way of visualizing some of that data in our charting using this, what we call the fundamental panel, which you can toggle on and off if you need more room. And the fundamental panel has panels as well, which has similar data to the report. And it can, most people use the chart that shows earnings and revenue. Let's see. So back to the group database. So in the group database, we have the entire stock market broke up into various industries, and we have indexes of those industries. We have the stock market broke up into what are called major industries, which are slightly larger than industries, but not quite full-on sectors. And then we have sectors, which there are only a few of, I think 11 at this time, there are 11 of them. And that's the other thing, a lot of our status, when you're looking at something, many common questions you might have can be answered by looking up in the status bar in the window. We change that based on what you're looking at and what window you're on. We also break the sectors out by industry. So here's the 11 sectors, and then under it is each industry that is part of that. And each one of these have indexes, and our indexes you can build an index of an index. And so we can actually show indexes of sectors that were computed from indexes of industry groups. And it's a fairly complicated indexing system, but it does allow you to see things at the industry and sector level that aren't really normally visible when you look at something like all securities. When you first start HGSI, and we also have major market indexes. These are the Dow, the NASDAQ 100, the Russell 2000. These are the bigger major market indexes. These are the components that make up those lists. They're also available under the component list, but we break them out here so it's easier to find them. Most of these folders, these groups, are really good fishing ponds because you can start applying your filtering against one of these groups. We also have the major market indexes themselves. These all start with the $sign, and these are the market generated charts. And those we store in this separate folder. They're also up in all market indexes, and we just break it out here for convenience. Under market breadth, we have a number of there are a number of indexes in our system that track advancing and declining volume, advancing and declining stocks, new highs and new lows, and we break those out so you can find them easily. These are used a lot in several of our indicators and charting systems. Now, we also have, every time you update HGSI, we generate what we call smart groups, which are, they're basically groups that are generated using filters against various reference groups. And so the filters, some of them are very simple filters, and some of them are much more complicated filters. And essentially, we pre-generate all these groups every time you do the update. Now, by default, when you first start HGSI, we've pared down the list of smart groups so that you would only have a very small set, and in which case this is just the popular ETF families and popular stock categories. So these are prices of the stocks, the class stocks, large, mid cap, new issues, optionable, preferred warrants. These are fields that we have filters available so that you can actually find these kind of stocks. And as a smart group, we pre-find them for you. But we also have a number of additional smart groups, and for a new user, you need to manage your group subscriptions and decide which smart groups you'd like to have. By default, I believe this is the set we normally sign up to include in your group database. But we have a number of additional smart groups that are much more specific to trading methodologies and other tools. And these include Ian Woodworth and Ron Brown's groups. the Morales and Ketcher groups, some groups that Charles Kirkpatrick. And so you might want to, when you first start using HGSI, enable a few of these. Now, after a while, you may find that these groups aren't really things you're interested in, and leaving them out will make HGSI faster. So I recommend, if you're not a regular user, take the group out. But I'm going to check them all here so you can see how this works. If you check the boxes of the groups you'd like to have under your smart groups and your custom groups, hit OK. We will fix the database and rebuild any indexes that need to be built, and then you'll have the groups that you weren't originally subscribed to will be back in your designer. And as you can see here in the designer, there's now a whole bunch more smart groups than just the HGSI starters, including Ian Woodward and Ron Brown's. These groups are built every day, and so my database was updated based on the end of day yesterday, the last database update from yesterday, and so that was the 27th. And so these groups are much more specific. They use criteria to find stocks. So looking for leaders in raw RS, that's the relative strength. These lists of stocks were created by applying complicated filters against other groups and generating this group. There is some documentation on what various smart groups, how they were built. The filters and rules used for the smart groups are generally available to users, but not by default. You will have to install some of the add-ons if you want to actually do these yourself. But these do find really interesting fishing holes. Stocks and groups moving to the upside, $1 to $5. So these are the stocks yesterday that the 101 securities that were moving up yesterday in the $1 to $5 range. The groups that are generated using smart groups include a number of more advanced filters. Our volume price analysis work, consistent earnings growth, and so you're probably going to want to explore what these smart groups are generating for you, and whether or not the smart groups finding the kinds of investment opportunities you're looking for. But the way the smart groups actually work is the way the product works. And so you can literally make your own groups the same way we generate these smart groups. And so we're going to really quick here use HGSI to build a new group, a list of prospects for today. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to go and we're going to start at one of the component lists. And so we're going to start with the S&P 1500. It's a good, solid list of 1,500 biggest stocks by market cap. And so it's a fairly good fishing pond. There's not a whole lot of non-standard kinds of stocks. And so to find stocks in HGSI, you can always type a stock name, a symbol, or you could type a word in the search on the designer is one way of doing it. But when you want to start looking for criteria, the main tool for this is the filter. And we ship with a number of filters. There are also a number of add-on filters you can install into HGSI, and I have a few of those already installed here. The starters are basically simple filters, and every filter consists of a set of rules. And so let's build a simple filter to find some stocks. So Now, when you go in and say make a new filter, you need to select user filters and say new filter. The folder, you can't put filters on the top level. You have to make a subgroup, and so recommend you store them in user filters, but you could make your own grouping organization. I recommend you name filters. So I like to use dates a lot, but you need to, without some sort of clue what you were looking for or why you built this filter, you can easily end up with a lot of filters that you don't know what they're supposed to do. So the filter, the way it works, it's kind of a logical statement. It's if a field, and so you have to pick one of the various many field names we have, and you can use the search to find a field. And then once you've found a field, so let's say, let's look for the 200-day moving average. So I'm just going to type 200 in here, and we got we have many fields based on the 200-day moving average. And so one of the fields we have, for example, is the percent close over the 200-day moving average. So let's choose that. And then we want it to be above the 200-day moving average. So let's just go greater than, and let's say 0. So now you don't know off the top of your head what that's going to do. And so we have this preview feature where you can pick a group, and we have these group pickers all throughout HGSI, and they all kind of work the same. Basically, you use the group picker to pick the group you're looking at. And so in this case, we're working with the S&P 1500. And so here's the stocks that meet this filter rule, and you'll see the columns appear based on the rules you stick up in the filter. And so in this case, this is the percent close over the 200-day moving average. And so 40% means it needs to be above the 200-day moving average. And so you can sort these by clicking on the header box, and so you can find you can take a look at the data that will happen when you apply this filter. And so we want to pick stocks that are above their 200-day moving average by a lot. So let's see what the bottom here looks like. So let's go with, I want to get a fair amount. Let's go with 75 just for now. So the close needs to be, and so this will produce a much smaller list of stocks. And then now we have this filter, and we say okay, and it applies the filter. When the filter is applied, the button will be pressed down, and you'll also see up in the status bar what the filter we applied is, and that produces this list of stocks. Now, once you have, and then to go back, you can go back and then edit that filter. Click on the filter button, press edit, and you can add another rule. If you weren't happy with how the filter was working and you needed to tweak the numbers, you go back in, edit the filter, make some changes, add additional rules. And so additional rules, you can, it's more of the same thing. You pick and or, so if this greater than that and this less than that, it's a logical kind of statement. So once you're happy with a list of stocks, so one of the things with our whole basis around groups is that you should make a group out of this. And so if you go to the file menu and you say make group, you can also right click to get to make group. If you say make group, it'll take whatever the current group and filter, whatever the results is, that you're seeing here, and it will make a new group with just those stocks in it. And it will make an index for that group. And then it will move you to that group. You can see which group you're looking at by it's the open filter. And we still have the filter applied, but every company already matched that filter. So one of the things you'll often find yourself having to do is remove the filter because you want to look at the group by itself. And you can do this two ways. You can go into the filter dialog and you can click on no filter and hit OK. Or if you hold down the shift key when you click on the filter button, it will remove the filter. And you'll probably do that quite a lot to toggle off the filters all the time. So here's the stocks that matched our filter, and here's the index that we built. And so if you double click on it will open up the charting, and it will show you the index that we built from that thing. Inside the charting, and this is true for most of our windows, the first drop down is the group, and it's the standard group selector that we have everywhere. And then the second drop down in the charting is the stocks that are in that group. And so you can see all the stocks. The order of the stocks has to do with how you got to the charting. So when you're in the warehouse and you sorted on one of our data fields, and then you go to the charting, this list will be in the same order as in the warehouse so that you can then use the next and previous to go through the stocks. You can also go through the stocks in the charting using the page up and page down keys. So you can walk through all the various stocks in the group you're in right now. By default, the charting is based on a view, and that's what this view selector is. It allows you to pick the view to use, and the default view is very plain. It's just basically the price and the volume of the stock. But we have a number of more advanced views, and you can use those to explore various kinds of stock charts. And so we're going to set up really quick here a new view so you can see how that works. It works very similar to the filter and pretty much all of our systems. There are these trees that contain the views or filters or whatever the thing you're editing is so that you can organize. Go into new views and say new view. Views, you need to come up with a name. Views in the charting include a date range to show, a chart, and there are several fixed dates, plus you can also enter a custom date range. You can choose various chart modes. Now the chart modes are stored with the chart view, so if you want a chart to always be monthly, you can set it here. But you can also, on the charting itself, there's a button in the corner so that you can change the daily to weekly, monthly, yearly on the fly. That's not part of the view. So you can have a daily view, and then you can say, I wonder what this looks like in a weekly view, and switch it dynamically while you're just looking at it. And then chart views, they have view options, and then the window itself. And in our charting, the charting is basically made up of, there are windows, and then inside windows, there are indicators. And so the default view basically is a price window and a volume window. And the price window has one indicator, price, and the volume window has one indicator, volume. And so you choose a window that you'd like to add a new indicator to, or you can make a new window if you'd like, and then say add indicator, and it brings up the list of indicators. Anytime in our product you see a search box, if you just type something, it'll filter the thing below based on what you typed. And so we're going to add a moving average indicator to this, and so the typing moving is a good way to find the moving average. the moving average indicator and say okay, and then it brings up the options for the moving average. And so we're going to change this to 200 and pick a color. Let's go with red. You can also pick various line types, which are the thickness of the pin that it'll use. You can also offset moving averages. Every one of our charting indicators has a collection of different options based on the kind of charting indicator it is. Moving averages, you can choose the type of mode, the field to use for the moving average, as well as the number of periods. And periods are based on the time scale that you're viewing in the charting. So if you're looking at a daily chart, that's 200 days. If you're looking at a weekly chart, that's 200 weeks. And that's pretty much standard for most charting packages. So now we've created a new view with an extra moving average, and we okay that, and we apply the view, and you go, hey, there's no moving average. And the reason why is because this stock we're looking at right here does not have 200 days of data. And so it's not going to show up a moving average. So here is a stock with at least 200 days of data, and so it can show the moving average. Let's see.
Matthew, I have a question.
Sure.
Back on that chart view options that you were looking at before, there are some offsets. Can you explain the offsets?
Sure. Why don't we do that real quick? Because it's not something this is something we've added in the last year or so. And so a moving average is basically, it takes the number of periods and the window for each day. It takes the last 200 periods. It takes the close each day and computes a moving average for it. And that window moves as you go along, and then it produces basically a smoothed curve. But these smooth curves, these offset features allow you to take the resulting moving average, which you can see here on this stock, and you can offset it either in time, and that's in number of periods, and you can also offset it in value. So for instance, sometimes for visualization purposes, it might be useful to see this a much higher than the actual stock. So if we were to offset the value by 100, basically we will add 100 to every day's moving average. And so when I change that and I change the view, now the moving average is basically, it's the same moving average, but it's offset 100, well, in this case, it's dollars, above where it would have been. And to get more details on actual numbers, you can always open the data window. The data window, you can toggle with, there's a click box here that says data window, and it opens this little data window that you can resize and put wherever you'd like on the thing. The data window changes as you move the crosshairs on the chart, and it will show you the value of both the stock itself as well as the indicators. And in this case, it's showing you the 200-day simple moving average, and we added the extra 100 on. So it's showing you the value with the additional amount. And if you right-click in HGSI, it's generally an easy way to edit things or change options. So in this case, you can see options for altering the zoom of the chart, clearing annotations, as well as editing the view and the indicators. And so I want to go back in here and I'm going to edit this indicator, and I'm going to choose the moving average that I added, and it brings back the moving average indicator option. And so if I change this back to 0, the moving average moves back to where it was. If I go in, and so you can offset the value, positive or negative, which can help you with getting the moving average where you'd like to be in the visual range of the chart. You can also scale the moving average, and so if you wanted to multiply the moving average by 2, it basically whatever is in the scale offset is multiplied by whatever the moving average is. So in this case, we multiply all the moving average values by 2, and so you can see what doubling that moving average looks like. And then the third option for the offsets is the time offset, and then this one's kind of strange. So the idea here is you can move the moving average forward or backward in time. So if we said minus 30 and say okay, now the moving average has been moved back 30 days, I think. Oh, I know what happened. All right, so important tip. The scale offset, if you multiply all the numbers by 0, you will get 0. So scale offset needs to be 1 if you want to clear it. When I cleared it, I set it to 0, and hence caused my moving average to completely vanish. So as you can see here, before the moving average was up at the top, and you can zoom in on the charting. We have these zoom controls. You can also zoom using the keyboard controls. Alt-1, Alt-2, 3, 4, 5, all very handy. So here I am zoomed in, and you can see basically I moved the moving average back 30 days, 30 periods. And so this was the value that was originally here, and now it's 30 days in the past. And so you can offset the moving average back in time, and you can also offset the moving average forward in time. And so whatever the value would have been at this point moves forward 30 days. And so in this case, the front of the moving average is actually now ahead of the stock. And you can actually see that data by adding extra periods on the chart. Normally the chart stops at the current day, the last day of data in the database. But you can add an extra 30 days of data to the end of the chart. And then the moving average, when it's moved forward, you can see how the moving average is now forward in time. And these are mostly, it's a visual effect. It's not, we can't compute the value of the moving average in the future. All we're doing is allowing you to move the moving average around a little bit, which is a pretty powerful feature for some kinds of charting. You can see what the scaling is very powerful, and the offsetting time can let you see a few interesting things with the lag on moving averages, which I think was a pretty good little question. We haven't really talked too much about those new features. So you do have to be careful when you set the scale to 0. Other than that, it's actually a fairly easy to use mechanism. Another thing that you may notice here is that almost all of our charting indicators have a number of options. If you select it in the thing and press edit, every indicator has its own collection of options. And some of these options can be very complicated. It's hard to say how the dialogues for options can be quite large and include things like options for color that are specific to this kind of indicator. In this case, the volume changes based on the close of the stock. And so if you change this, you'll see the volume line becomes multicolored based on the closing of the stock. Now, if you have questions about an indicator, the help is your go-to guide. The help will bring up the help for the specific charting indicator, and it'll give you as much help as humanly possible. So if you're wondering what all the zillions of options are, it's your go-to tool. Now, one of the things you'll find is we ship with a number of charting indicators, and the view, as you can see, our charting has a lot of advanced features for creating interesting charts that can view all kinds of data. And the trick to figuring out what you're looking at is the edit the view dialog. If you bring up the edit the view dialog, and that's the little pencil, almost all of our windows, they consist of two buttons, one which lets you manage the views, and the other one which will let you edit the view or change the view. And those two icons are used consistently throughout the product. So if you open up the edit the view dialog, you see the view, and you see it consists of windows, and each one of these windows, now remember the fundamental panel is a feature of the charting itself. It's not a part of the view. But the top window is this force 13-day EMA, and you can see there's a window here, and that contains two indicators, a force index and a force index as a histogram. And each one of those indicators has options. And so if you're ever wondering what something is, if you edit the view and find the window that matches, and usually most windows have windows have options also, and one of the options is to label the window. And so if a window has a label here on the side, you can easily find which window it is. So this would be the 1 versus 10-day estimated volume, and that's got this one indicator in it. If you open the indicator up, you can see what the options are and figure out what that indicator's trying to pull off. None of this is magic. There's no scripts. It's all options and dialogues. So it is possible for you to actually figure out what a view is set up to do. It may not seem simple at first, but the views, they just consist of windows and indicators. And you can, reverse engineer, so to speak, what exactly you're looking at, which starts to become more important when you're looking at, some of these views have a massive number of options, and figuring out what exactly was set up in that view may take you a little bit of effort. And so the basics of how the view system works applies even to the simplest view all the way up to the most complicated view. There's no real magic there. So in this case, we created this list. We created a custom view and we saved it, and you can then walk through the list. Now, you can see I modified our view to have this extra blank space here on the front. And so now as we walk through all these stocks, we'll have extra blank space and an offset moving average. And you can then look through the stocks you found, prospecting using the filtering, and apply various more advanced charting views. And that's one approach to using HGSI, but it's certainly not the only approach. Most of our prospecting you're probably going to do in version of the warehouse, which is basically a giant database spreadsheet where just like the charting and just like the designer, there's groups, and in this case it's the group we created when we did the filter, and then there are views. And in this case, it's the default view, which I think I added in some extra columns. The views, you can manage your views using the manage create warehouse views. These are the views that are that came with the product, as well as add-ons that were added. Then you can also edit the view, and a view in HGSI consists of columns to display, and that's what you see here on the right. And these are the data fields. There are more than 700 data fields in HGSI, and you can visualize all of them. In addition to all the charting functionality, the database views, the database columns include a vast number of things, but they don't have individual options. So for instance, you can add the Wilder RSI, and you can remove some fields, but you cannot create your own version of the Wilder RSI. You have to choose from the database we have, but we add new data fields all the time, and odds are there's something close to what you're looking for. And so again, the search is your key tool. Type something like what you're looking for, and the search will help you find things that list that. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, Matthew, there's something that you could point out if you go back to the list of views that you have available.
Okay.
And you see, some people make views and they make monstrous field, a monster chart that shows you hundreds of fields. Or you could do something like, say, I only want to have several different warehouse views that cover different categories. And so an example of that would be under the starters. If you go to HGSI starters, and there's the all data fields. So what you have here are all of the data fields for any one of those particular categories laid out already for you in the warehouse view. So if you were just interested in, the charting indicator values for ADX, you could just click that and then you'll get them.
And so this is a already made up view, but you can also make these views yourself. And in this case, it's a view that was created by adding all the ADX value, all the warehouse columns that deal with ADX to the view. And so each column in the warehouse is sortable on the data field. The sorts have default directions. So the first time you sort on it, it'll go a way that's most likely good for that data field. If you click on it again, it'll change the direction. The columns, obviously, you can make larger. It's very much like Excel in a lot of ways. The first column is the first column. Let me go to a larger group so that you can see how this works. If you're in a very large group, the first column will not scroll, and you can actually put more columns in on the left before the scroll bar line. So that you can see, so you can always see the name of the company, even though you've got so many data fields. But you can always create these views in such a way so that you actually have a lot of views as opposed to one view with every data field, which is what George is talking about. Because while you can make a view with hundreds of columns, you might find that you've got to scroll over so far. There are so many columns in that view you're looking at that it's just too much data. And so one of the things you can do is create a collection of views like these ones in the starters that are simpler versions that just show a handful of data fields, which isn't going to be nearly as hard to digest. And then all of HGSI have these little quick pickers that allow you to walk through a set of views. Now, this works a little better if you have a bigger screen. And in case it wasn't obvious, HGSI does work on multiple monitors. All our windows are SDI windows and can be moved wherever you want them to. But the more screen real estate you have, the better off you are. Well, let's go back to our prospecting group so it's smaller. With the quick picker, which is the little hand icon, you can walk through views really quickly. You can just click on them and they get applied. You can also use the keyboard and walk through a bunch of views really fast. And views have can not only change the columns that are available, but it can also apply its own filter, and it can activate a filter. We have a feature in our product called the combo ranking that we're not going to talk about today, but it is one of our more advanced features where it allows you to essentially rank any of the 700 data fields that make up HGSI against all the stocks that you're looking at right now. And so, many data fields that are part of stocks are not actual numbers, or they're not easily numbers. You can't necessarily easily rank some things in a global way, but you can compare the value for a list of stocks of a specific field, which is what the sorting essentially does. And so our combo ranking system allows you to combo rank any of the data fields using the sorting mechanism and assign that a numeric value, which can be really very powerful. And there are other videos and guides to how that can work for you and allow you to essentially rank a list of stocks, rank all the securities if you'd really like, against weighted criteria of multiple data fields, which it really is part of the key core pieces of HGSI's stock finding abilities. But it all starts with the view, the quick pick system, and how you can create views that change, not just the columns, which I'm mainly doing here, but there are other views that will actually apply filters. So you can actually use the views themselves as a way of prospecting for stocks. And then again, just like before, if you apply a filter to a group, and let's go to all securities. So here's all the stocks that meet that filter we made earlier today. And so there are 1,003 securities, and we can make this into a group. We can do make group from list, and it will take the group we've got, these 1,003 stocks, and we can make a new group out of it. And we can make an index for them. And then we can remove the filter, and now we could go in and, so now we've got the 1,003 stocks plus the index, so there's 1,004, and we can then apply a different filter, essentially cascading down the list. So we can apply a volume breakout filter, and so here's the 4 stocks of that 1,003 that had a volume breakout, and we could make that into another list. You can also add it to a group with the quick add to group, and almost all of these kind of functionalities, there's keyboard accelerators, so if you'd like to go faster, you could, rather than using the right-click menus or the file menu, to easily, the idea is, one of the things you can do is, obviously you can make a group out of this entire list, or you could look at each one individually in the charting, and if it looked interesting based on whatever the criteria you were actually looking for. And so these stocks all have huge volume breakouts. This is like a penny stock, well, not a penny stock anymore, had a giant breakout on volume. And so if you were interested in this stock, you could then add it to a group, and then you could make a new group, like, and again, I recommend using a date so you know what it is. And so now in the designer, you can see that you've got this group that has the stock you added. And so you can really quickly go through the database, apply a few views and filters to get lists of interesting stocks. Then look at those stocks in the charting and decide they're still interesting and make more groups out of those. And then you can track those groups in various ways, including one of the key ways of tracking a group is you can use the index that we compute to see how that group is performing. And once you've created the group, the index will update every day, and so you can see how that group's performance has gone. It gives you a way of essentially viewing it as a collection, rather than having to look through every single stock every time. Indexes are quick shortcuts to aggregating groups of stocks together. Now, I think we've only talked about maybe 20% of HGSI at this point. There's vastly more complicated features in the designer. The designer has a number of features for generating reports, computing performance of groups, testing strategies against groups. There's a much more advanced version of our system for ranking price and volume moves. That's part of our ranker utility. And obviously our charting has a number of advanced charting indicators that can do some amazing tricks, combining some of the features of our database as well as traditional technical analysis. So this is just the surface of what HGSI can do. You're probably going to need to spend a little while, but these basics, I think, will help answer questions on where you need to look and how you can problem solve your own, how do I do my investment strategy with this tool?
Matthew, I think it's 10% of what you covered.
Yeah, and you may be right.
That's about an hour. You need about nine more hours to get it all.
9 more hours to go over everything. Yeah, we're just scratching the surface here, but I think you can kind of start to see the product. It's not just a simple charting program. It has a huge amount of depth into what it can do and how it can push data around. I think we're going to call it quits for today, and we'll do one of these again next week.